Well, I had a great couple of conversations with some of you after class last night, and I always appreciate that very much. Um, I was informed, maybe admonished about one of my illustrations, maybe not being as helpful as I intended it to be, and that was my clunky illustration about the last battle from C.S. Lewis. By the way, if you haven't read the book, you should. It's a really good book, and really the whole series is fantastic. But I did want to make the point that although I wasn't totally agreeing with C.S. Lewis's illustration, except insofar as it might apply to what went on in the Old Testament, something of which we have absolutely no knowledge, and that is whether or not God would extend his grace to people who lived outside the law. Romans 1 suggests to me that he might, because it does talk about Gentiles who are law keepers, and yet who were law keepers without being circumcised. And so it did seem that God recognized people were attempting to live righteous lives in the Old Testament and who may have been outside of the law of Moses. But the point, of course, is the same, is it not? None of them succeeded. None of them are actually righteous. And every one of them needed Jesus. Now, of course, none of that illustration even remotely applies to today, because today the message is people need Jesus, and that's our job, to bring the message to them. So let me take that illustration, contextualize it, and clarify it, thanks to the admonition of some of the folks in the audience. Then I want to just take a second to maybe summarize, based upon some other comments that you all have made, a little better what Romans 4 was all about. And for those of you who missed it, maybe this will be helpful. When we look at this, if we were to summarize this whole chapter, clearly the message in part is that when God says something will happen, we should trust him, because it does happen. God, in Romans chapter 4, shows his ability to create life from dead things. And that included the deadness of Abraham's body and Sarah's body. And certainly the illustration must be, it's also going to be that same power in God that will create life from my dead body, because it was that same power of God that created life from the dead body of Christ when after he died, it rose him from the dead. This is how God has always worked. It's how God will work in my life too. And will you believe that promise? Really, is I think what Paul's trying to say. God will create life out of death. We can't accomplish it on our own. Abraham tried in multiple different ways to accomplish it on his own, and he couldn't. But God can accomplish it. And look what happens. See, when we have faith in God, we act differently. We have faith that he is going to do something special. We have faith in his promises. And so what do we do? Do we sit around just lazily doing nothing? No, we act differently. We act believing in God's power to accomplish something great. And so that is certainly what Abraham did. And of course, we'll get into that a lot more in the later part of this book. So actions are clearly a part of it for Abraham, because he was walking in the footsteps of faith. And really that's the point, is it not, of verse 12. There are actions connected with our belief and in God's power to do it. But God will do it, not us. We need to act like God is going to do it, act like God is going to accomplish his promises in our life. So lots of great reminders about that reality throughout chapter 12. And of course, isn't it challenge with, Romans chapter 4, isn't it a challenge that Romans has so much wonderful doctrine and theology in it that it's easy to go down rabbit holes and get distracted by certain things. So I ask for your grace, as sometimes I lead the class down those rabbit holes, sometimes you lead me down rabbit holes and we don't rein ourselves in. But either way, those rabbit holes are fascinating and interesting. I hope they're drawing you closer to God, but I don't want to escape the message of chapter 4. That is, life comes from God, and God has promised us time and time again that he will create life out of our death, out of our destruction. And we put our faith totally in him to do that. He will do it. And then we will walk in faith. And so I hope that's a helpful summary for chapter 4 for those of you who weren't here, and a mea culpa for some of the clunky illustrations for those of you who were. It sure is a blessing to be teaching you. Have a wonderful rest of the week.